Welcome back, nerdlings. In this short video, we're going to be discussing photosynthesis woes, aka photorespiration. Before we start discussing photorespiration, I first want to discuss the process of transpiration. So in transpiration, we have leaves, and leaves contain openings called stomata, kind of like the mouths of the leaves, if you will. And these are not to be confused with the stroma. So the stomata allow gas exchange between the leaf's interior as well as the environment. Now we want oxygen to leave and we want carbon dioxide to come in so we can fuel the process of photosynthesis. However, plants that survive in arid climates, especially deserts, lose water vapor as well. And so they have to have a way of controlling this because this creates a major problem. So plants in these dry areas have few stomata on the bottom of their leaves as an adaptation to avoid water loss. Now, as far as photorespiration, in photosynthesis video, we talked about the enzyme rubisco that basically binds both carbon dioxide and oxygen. And so usually it's binding carbon dioxide with ribulose bisphosphate, creating that 6-carbon molecule. Now, unfortunately, it can also bind oxygen, not just carbon dioxide. Now, the binding of this oxygen initiates a process called photorespiration. Now, this process, just like the other process of the Calvin cycle, is going to use ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reaction, as well as energy. However, it doesn't actually result in the production of glucose. Obviously, this is a big problem for the plant because it's basically wasting energy and not producing glucose, which it can then use later on in the process of cellular respiration. So plants have come up with several methods to prevent this from occurring. So as photosynthesis occurs, the available carbon dioxide concentration decreases in the leaf. Now the oxygen concentration starts to increase. Good for us, bad for the plants. Photorespiration becomes more common, especially for plants that thrive in these hot, arid climates. So again, it's a problem for two different reasons. The plant cannot go through the Calvin cycle, reducing the amount of glucose that they can produce, which they use in the process of cellular respiration. They don't actually produce glucose for us. And then photorespiration also, like I said, wastes energy. We're wasting ATP and NADPH, and we're not producing glucose. So plants in these hot climates have adapted to overcome photorespiration. So normal plants are referred to as C3 plants. And if you recall, they get their name from that PGA, or that phosphoglycerate. So they don't have any special adaptations for photosynthesis, and these are plants that thrive as well as live in mild climates, and they can open their stomata at any time without fear of losing too much water through water vapor. Now we also have plants that have adapted for photorespiration. We have C4 plants and we have CAM plants. Now in C4 plants, we know that there's a spatial separation of our light-dependent reactions as well as the Calvin cycle. Now the Calvin cycle occurs in bundle sheath cells, and this prevents oxygen from coming into contact with the enzyme rubisco. So that process basically doesn't happen because of this barrier. So carbon dioxide is then taken into mesophyll cells and converted into a 4-carbon acid. Now this acid is then transported to the bundle sheath cells, and it's converted back into carbon dioxide, which can then be used by the rubisco enzyme. In CAM plants, they've adapted to avoid water loss. And they do this by mostly opening their stomata at night when the climate is much cooler, and it helps to avoid this water loss. They too store their carbon dioxide as a 4-carbon acid in the vacuoles for use later in the day. Now they convert their 4-carbon acid to carbon dioxide, and they will resume the Calvin cycle during the day. They sparingly will open their stomata during the day whenever we get an oxygen concentration that gets too high. So they'll have to open them up to kind of get rid of their waste products, which is oxygen. And that is good for us. So as a recap with photosynthesis, we have it occurring in two different parts. We have our light-dependent reactions and our light-independent reactions, which can also be referred to as carbon fixation, Calvin cycle, and again, if you have an old school professor, he or she might refer to this as the dark reaction. Now there are two parts and they have a cyclical relationship. The light-dependent reactions are non-cyclical. They use water, sunlight energy, and chlorophyll to generate usable ATP and NADPH, electron carrier. And these are used in the Calvin cycle, as well as oxygen, which is released as a byproduct. We also have our light-independent reactions, which are cyclical. Now they are responsible for fixing the inorganic compound from carbon dioxide into the organic compound of glucose through a series of steps, which is controlled and mediated by the most abundant enzyme in the world, rubisco. And we do have several plants, again, that are adapted to undergo this process, even in unfavorable environments. And those examples were our C4 plants, as well as our CAM plants. Well, I hope this was helpful. You have a little bit more of an understanding about what photorespiration is and how it's involved with the process of photosynthesis. For more videos like this one, you can go to www.nerdlingscience.com. This is the Queen Nerdling signing off for today. Have an awesome day.